One more glance at his phone and his career would be over. That was the warning. Clear. Final. Sitting across the desk, Daniel Carter didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. Because the woman threatening his job had no idea what he had already survived. She didn't know about the late-night hospital rooms, about the promise he made to a dying wife, about the 7-year-old girl who depended on him to come home. When Daniel finally spoke, the office went silent, not from fear, but from truth. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Children's Hospital hummed their familiar electric lullaby at 2:47 a.m. Daniel Carter stood at the nurse's station on the 4th floor, reviewing discharge papers for a patient who would be going home in the morning. His eyes moved efficiently across the checklist: medications, follow-up appointments, dietary restrictions. 8 years in pediatric nursing had made these routines as natural as breathing. His phone vibrated in his scrub pocket. He pulled it out discreetly, angling it below the counter. The screen showed a text from his neighbor. Mrs. Patterson. Emma woke up crying. Said she had a nightmare about you not coming home. I got her back to sleep, but she asked me to text you. Daniel's chest tightened. He typed quickly with one thumb. Tell her I'll be home at 7:30 like always. Pancakes for breakfast. Carter. The voice cut through the quiet ward like a scalpel. Daniel looked up. Elaine Porter stood 15 feet away, arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. The director of nursing services didn't typically prowl the night shift unless something was wrong. She wore a gray blazer despite the hour, her badge catching the overhead light. My office, she said. Now, not a question, not a request. Daniel glanced at the charge nurse, Marcus, who gave him a subtle shrug that meant, I have no idea what this is about. Daniel slipped his phone back into his pocket and followed Elaine down the corridor, past the sleeping children's rooms, past the break room where 2 nurses on their meal break looked up with curious expressions. Elaine's office was on the 3rd floor, tucked behind the administrative wing. She unlocked it with a keycard and held the door open. Waiting. Daniel stepped inside. The room smelled of lavender air freshener and old coffee. A desk dominated the space, flanked by filing cabinets and a bookshelf full of binders, with labels like Policy Manual 2024 and Joint Commission Standards. Elaine closed the door with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. She didn't invite him to sit. She walked around her desk, opened a folder, and stood there, studying its contents as if Daniel wasn't in the room at all. The silence stretched. This was a power play. He recognized it from his earliest days as a nurse, the strategic use of discomfort to establish hierarchy. Finally, she looked up. Do you know why you're here? Daniel kept his voice level. I don't. Your phone, Elaine said. You've been on it 14 times during your shift tonight. Daniel blinked. 14? That couldn't be right. He checked his phone maybe 3 or 4 times per shift, always during quiet moments, always away from patient rooms. 14 documented instances, Elaine continued, tapping the folder. Security protocols. We monitor device activity on hospital Wi-Fi, so they were tracking. Daniel hadn't known that, but it made sense. Hospitals were careful about data breaches. I check messages during breaks, Daniel said calmly. Never when I'm with patients. That's not the point. Elaine's tone was flat, administrative. The point is distraction. The point is professionalism. The point is that when you're on duty, your attention belongs to this hospital. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't about patient care. If it were, she would have led with that she would have mentioned a mistake, a complaint, a near miss. This was about control. Has there been any complaint about my work? He asked. Elaine's jaw tightened. This isn't about complaints, it's about standards. But has there been a complaint? A beat of silence. No, she admitted. But that's not the measure we use for. Then what measure are we using? Daniel interrupted gently. Because if my patients are safe, if their families are satisfied, If my charting is accurate and my medications are correct, then I'm doing my job. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Your job is more than a checklist, Carter. Your job is being present. Fully present. And when you're on your phone 14 times in one shift, you're not, Daniel could have argued. He could have explained that every single one of those checks was about Emma making sure she was okay. Coordinating with the neighbor who watched her overnight, ensuring his daughter felt safe even when he wasn't physically there. He could have said that being a good father made him a better nurse, not a worse one. But he knew it wouldn't matter, because Elaine wasn't interested in context. She was interested in compliance. I understand, Daniel said quietly. I'm glad. Elaine opened a drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. Because this is your formal warning. She slid it across the desk. Daniel stared at the document. Official hospital letterhead. His name, a list of timestamps, and at the bottom, a line for his signature. We'll discuss this further in the morning, Elaine said. But I wanted you to know tonight. One more incident, one more time. I see you on that phone during work hours and you're done here. Do I make myself clear? Daniel looked up at her. Elaine's face was unreadable, her authority absolute. And for the first time in 8 years, Daniel wondered if he could keep this job and keep his promise to his daughter at the same time. Crystal clear, he said. Daniel Carter became a nurse because of his wife. Sarah believed that healing was the most human thing a person could do. She'd seen something in Daniel he hadn't seen in himself, a quiet strength that made frightened people feel safe. They'd met in college, she was studying social work. He was uncertain about everything. She dragged him to volunteer at a children's hospital one weekend. Something clicked when a scared 6-year-old grabbed his hand during a procedure. 2 years later, he enrolled in nursing school. 4 years after that, they married. 3 years after that, Emma was born. And 2 years ago, Sarah died. Ovarian cancer, stage 4. She'd ignored symptoms too long, too focused on her foster care caseload. By the time the pain became unbearable, the disease had spread. In the final week, Sarah grabbed his wrist during a moment of clarity. Promise me, she whispered. Promise me you won't disappear into work. Promise me Emma knows you're there. I promise, Daniel said. Say it again. I promise. Sarah closed her eyes. Then I can let go. She died 3 days later, while Emma was at school. Now, 2 years later, Daniel kept that promise the only way he knew how. He worked nights, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. so he could be home when Emma woke. Breakfast every morning. Walking her to the bus. Every parent-teacher conference, every school play, he packed her lunches with notes. You're braver than you think. Love, Dad. Afternoons, while Emma was at school, he slept. Not well, his body never adjusted to the night schedule, but enough to function. At 3 p.m., he picked her up. Park, library, homework at the kitchen table. At 8 p.m., Emma went to bed. Mrs. Patterson, their neighbor, came over while Daniel left for his shift. Emma still woke sometimes, confused and scared, reaching for a parent who wasn't there. Their small, 2-bedroom apartment smelled perpetually of fried onions. Emma's room had glow-in-the-dark stars Sarah had put up. Daniel's room still had Sarah's books on the nightstand, her reading glasses folded on top, waiting. Emma asked about her mother often. What was Mom's favorite color? Did she like strawberries? Would she be proud of my science project? Daniel always answered. That was part of the promise, too, keeping Sarah alive in the small ways that mattered. His phone wasn't a distraction. It was a lifeline. Every text from Mrs. Patterson was reassurance. Every photo of Emma's artwork reminded him why he did this work. Every message from Emma, "Good night, Daddy, I love you," proved he was succeeding where it mattered most. But Elaine Porter didn't know any of that. The next evening, Daniel reported to Elaine's office. Marcus, the charge nurse, was there as a witness, a good guy who'd covered Daniel's shifts when Emma was sick. Elaine had added pages to her folder. 8 years with Riverside, she began. Solid performance. No major issues until now. She slid a spreadsheet across the desk, a log of Daniel's phone activity. 6 months of data. Timestamps highlighted in yellow. 14 instances last night. The pattern goes back months. 9 to 11 checks per shift. What's the acceptable range? Daniel asked. Elaine hesitated. There's no formal number, but the expectation is minimal use. So, professional judgment, Elaine corrected. Daniel studied the spreadsheet. Most entries under 2 minutes. The longer ones, 5 or 6 minutes, marked during breaks. Have any of these occurred while I was with a patient? Not directly. Medication errors? Charting errors? Missed alarms? No. Elaine's voice tightened with irritation. But that's not the standard. The standard is professionalism. Setting an example. Demonstrating commitment. Daniel leaned forward. I show up on time. I stay late when needed. I take the hardest cases. I train new nurses. 100% attendance except 3 days when Emma had pneumonia. What suggests I'm not committed? The part where you can't put your phone down. Marcus cleared his throat. Elaine, Daniel's one of our most reliable nurses. Parents request him. The pediatric team voted him Nurse of the Quarter twice. I'm aware, Elaine said curtly. But accolades don't exempt anyone from policy. What policy? Daniel asked. Show me the written policy that says I can't check my phone during a break. Elaine's jaw clenched. It's about the spirit of the policy. Then help me understand the spirit, Daniel said evenly. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like the spirit is that we're supposed to be robots. Elaine closed the folder sharply. Effective immediately, you're on formal probation. Any device used during your shift breaks included results in suspension. A second incident results in termination. Sign this or resign tonight. She slid the paper forward. Marcus looked stricken. Elaine. Thank you, Marcus. You're dismissed. Marcus hesitated, then left. Elaine held out a pen. Sign it, Carter, or clean out your locker. Daniel didn't take the pen. He looked at this woman who'd never asked why he checked his phone, never inquired about his circumstances. Can I ask you something? Daniel said quietly. What? Do you have kids? Her expression flickered. That's not relevant. I think it is. Because if you had a 7-year-old daughter who woke up crying, scared you weren't coming home, you'd understand why I check my phone. To make sure she's okay. To keep a promise I made to her mother before she died. Elaine's face didn't soften. I'm sorry for your loss, but personal circumstances don't change policy. Then, the policy is cruel. The policy is necessary. For who? Elaine stood abruptly. Sign the form. You have until end of shift. Daniel stood too. He left the unsigned paper on her desk and walked out. Daniel returned to the 4th floor. Marcus was waiting, his face tight with frustration. That was insane, Marcus muttered. She can. And she will, Daniel said, pulling up the patient board. He spent the next 4 hours in meticulous focus, adjusted IV drips, soothed a frightened child through a blood draw, called parents with updates, taught a teenager post-surgical care. He didn't check his phone. Not once. At 3 a.m., during his break, Daniel sat alone in the staff lounge, his phone in his hand, unopened. He thought about Emma, about the promise, about the impossibility of being 2 places at once, sign the form, keep his job, but agree Emma's fear didn't matter. Don't sign, lose everything. It wasn't a choice, it was a trap. At 5 a.m., Marcus found him. She's looking for you. Needs your decision before shift change. Daniel walked back to Elaine's office. The unsigned form still sat on her desk. Well? Elaine asked. Before I answer, Daniel said, has there been a single incident where my phone use compromised patient safety? I've already told you. I'm asking you to think about it. Really think. Was there ever a moment where a patient suffered because of me? Elaine didn't answer. Because I can tell you about moments where patients benefited. The time I translated instructions for a Spanish-speaking family. The time I checked a medical app for a rare drug interaction. The time I showed a scared kid a video of puppies before surgery. Those aren't the same as texting your daughter. You're right, but they're all examples of me using judgment, recognizing that rules aren't always black and white, that sometimes being a good nurse means adapting to real, messy, complicated needs. And you think texting your child is part of being a good nurse? I think being her father makes me a better nurse, Daniel said. Because I understand what these families are going through. I know what it's like to be terrified in a hospital. That empathy, that connection isn't something I can just turn off. It's who I am. Elaine leaned back. So you won't sign. I won't agree to a policy that asks me to choose between my daughter and my calling. If that means I lose my job, so be it. But I won't betray who I am. He turned to leave. Wait, Elaine said. Daniel stopped. Elaine stared at the form, then slowly tore it in half. Go home, Carter. We'll revisit this later. Daniel nodded and walked out. 2 days passed without word from Elaine. Daniel kept his phone in his locker except during breaks, checking quickly, making sure no one saw. It felt like waiting for a storm. Friday evening. Email from HR. Mandatory meeting. Monday, 9 a.m. The storm had arrived. Daniel spent the weekend acting normal for Emma. Farmer's market, cookies, movies. But every time Emma laughed, Daniel felt the weight of what might be coming, losing his ability to provide for her. Sunday night, after Emma slept, Daniel did the math. 2 months of savings. After that, nothing. Monday morning, Daniel dropped Emma at school. She waved, her smile uncomplicated. His chest ached. At 8:45 a.m., he arrived at the administrative building. The receptionist barely looked up. Conference room B. Through the window, Daniel saw Elaine and Richard Moore, the HR director 50s, balding, perpetually tired. He cared more about procedure than people. Daniel knocked and entered. Mr. Carter, Richard said. Please, sit. Richard opened with standard preamble, confidentiality, professionalism. Then he slid papers across the table. Formal corrective action plan, Richard explained. Concerns about device usage, steps to remain employed. Dense language. Failure to adhere. Repeated distraction. Probationary period. Zero tolerance. Essentially what Director Porter offered, Richard continued, with one addition. Mandatory counseling for work-life balance concerns. Counseling? Daniel repeated. To help manage personal stressors so they don't interfere professionally. My personal stressor is my 7-year-old daughter. You're suggesting I need counseling because I'm a single parent? Richard shifted. That's not what. Then what are you saying? Elaine leaned forward. Your inability to disconnect suggests a lack of boundaries. Counseling can help. Daniel felt something cold settle. You want me to sign a document saying I need therapy because I check on my child. That being a present father is a psychological issue. That's not how we'd phrase it. Richard said quickly. Then how would you phrase it? They exchanged a glance. Look, Richard said, attempting warmth. We're trying to help. Single parenthood is hard. But when you're here, you need to be fully here. If you can't do that alone, we're offering support. By threatening to fire me. By offering a path forward. Daniel looked at the papers. Final page. Signature line. Beneath it. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination. Sign this or lose everything. Daniel thought about Emma. About Sarah. About the woman who'd quit a job because her boss asked her to cut corners. Sarah, who'd said integrity meant refusing to betray yourself when it counted. Daniel pushed the papers back. No, he said. Richard blinked. Excuse me? No, I won't sign this. Elaine's face darkened. Then you're resigning. No. I'm refusing to agree to an unjust policy. You don't have that option, Richard said, hardening. You either sign, or your employment is terminated immediately. Then terminate me, Daniel said calmly. Silence. Richard looked stunned. Elaine's expression was unreadable. You're refusing a reasonable accommodation? Richard said slowly. I'm refusing to be told that loving my daughter is a distraction that needs managing. I'm refusing to agree that empathy is incompatible with professionalism, and I'm refusing to sign a document that asks me to lie about who I am. This is career suicide, Elaine said flatly. Daniel looked at her. Maybe, but at least I'll be able to look my daughter in the eye. He stood. Richard scrambled up. Wait, Daniel. Let's discuss modifications. There's nothing to modify. You've made your position clear, and I've made mine. He walked toward the door. Carter, Elaine called out. Daniel stopped. If you walk out without signing, you won't work here again. Is that what you want? Daniel turned. What I want is to live in a world where being a good father and a good nurse aren't mutually exclusive. But since that's not the world you're offering, I'll find one that is. He opened the door and left. Daniel drove home in a daze. The finality settled in, not with regret, but hollow uncertainty. He'd stood up for what was right. But standing up didn't pay rent. The apartment was quiet. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the wall. What now? Job searching. Update, resume. Reach out to contacts. Per diem shifts while figuring things out. He could make it work. He had to. At 3 p.m., Daniel picked Emma up. She climbed in with her usual enthusiasm, backpack thudding beside her. How was your day? Good. We learned about the solar system. Did you know Jupiter has 79 moons? I did not. So cool, Dad. I want to be an astronaut, or maybe a veterinarian. Or both. Daniel smiled despite everything. Both sounds perfect. They went to the park. Emma ran to the swings. Daniel pushed her higher, her laughter cutting through the weight in his chest. Other parents scattered around, some watching their kids with the same mixture of love and exhaustion Daniel felt. Emma jumped off, landing triumphantly. Ta-da! She climbed onto the bench beside him. Are you okay, Dad? Daniel looked at this small, perceptive person. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm okay. You seem sad. Just tired. Is it because of work? Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to worry her, but he wouldn't lie. A little bit. But it'll be okay. Did someone get mad at you? Sort of. Because I was checking my phone to make sure you were okay, and they thought I should focus only on work. Emma frowned. But you're my dad. I know, so you have to check on me. I know. Then they're wrong, Emma said with 7-year-old certainty. Daniel's throat tightened. You think so? Yes. Mom always said you have to take care of the people you love. Even if it's hard. Daniel blinked against the sting. She did say that. Emma looked up. The question landed like a stone. Daniel pulled Emma close, kissing the top of her head. You know what? You're exactly right. They are wrong. Emma nodded, satisfied. Good. Now can we go home? I'm hungry. That evening, Daniel sat on Emma's bed while she brushed her teeth. The glow-in-the-dark stars were beginning to show. Emma climbed in, stuffed rabbit under one arm. Dad? Yeah? If you get a new job, will you still be home for breakfast? Daniel's heart clenched. I'll do everything I can. Promise? I promise. Emma studied him, then smiled. Okay. Good night. Good night, sweetheart. Daniel closed the door halfway and stood in the hallway, listening to her settle. He'd chosen her. He'd chosen the promise. He didn't regret it, but he was terrified. On Tuesday morning, Daniel woke to an unexpected voicemail from 6:47 a.m. Mr. Carter. This is Richard Moore from Human Resources. I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting with you, if you're willing. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. Daniel stared at his phone, confused. A follow-up? They'd made termination clear yesterday. What was there to follow up on? He called Richard back. Daniel, Richard answered immediately. Thank you for getting back to me. I'd like to meet this afternoon, if possible, without Director Porter. Just you and me. I think we may have handled things poorly yesterday, Richard said carefully. I'd like another chance to talk this through. Daniel's instinct was to refuse, but curiosity and the reality of his financial situation made him pause. When? 2 o'clock? My office? I'll be there. Richard's office was smaller than Elaine's, cluttered with family photos and paperwork. When Daniel arrived, Richard stood and shook his hand warmly, gesturing to a chair. Thanks for coming, Richard said. Daniel sat, his guard still up. Richard settled into his own chair and removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I'm going to be honest with you, Daniel. What happened yesterday was wrong. Daniel blinked. What? Elaine is. She means well. She runs a tight ship, and sometimes that means she loses sight of the human element. And I didn't push back the way I should have. So what changed? I went home last night and told my wife what happened, Richard said, and she reminded me that I've taken personal calls during work hours. I've left early for my son's soccer games. I've checked my phone during meetings, and no one's ever threatened to fire me for it. Daniel didn't respond. You were right, Richard continued. The policy we were trying to enforce isn't about safety or professionalism. It's about control. And that's not fair. So what now? Daniel asked cautiously. Now, I'd like to offer you your job back. No probation. No corrective action plan. No counseling requirement. Daniel stared at him. Just like that? Just like that, Richard confirmed. With one condition. Here it comes, Daniel thought. I want you to help us rewrite the personal device policy, Richard said. Something that actually makes sense. Something that balances the hospital's needs with the reality that our staff have lives outside these walls. Something fair for everyone, not just parents, but all caregivers, all staff members who need grace. Daniel leaned back, processing. And Elaine agreed to this? Richard hesitated. Not yet. But I'm the HR director, and this is my call. I'll handle Elaine. Why am I doing this? Yeah, Richard put his glasses back on. Because I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of good people burn out or get pushed out over stupid, fixable things. And I'm tired of it. You're a good nurse, Daniel. The kind we should be trying to keep, not forcing out. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest relief. Maybe, or exhaustion, releasing its grip. There's one more thing, Richard added. I want you to know that your situation, checking on your daughter, that's not unusual. A lot of our staff are parents. A lot are caregivers. They all deserve the same grace we're extending to you. So when we rewrite this policy, it won't be just for you. It'll be for everyone. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, you'll come back? Okay, I'll come back, Daniel said. On one condition of my own. What's that? No one gets punished for being human, Daniel said. Not just parents, not just caregivers, everyone. If someone needs to take a call, if they need a moment, if they need flexibility, we give it to them. As long as patients are safe, we trust people to manage their own lives. Richard smiled. Deal. Daniel returned to work the following Monday. Word had spread about the confrontation with Elaine. Hospital gossip moved fast, and several nurses stopped him in the hallway to quietly express their support. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. You're braver than I am, man. Elaine, for her part, was conspicuously absent from the floor for the first week. For the first 2 weeks, things were tense but manageable. Daniel did his job. He checked his phone when he needed to. No one said anything. The policy change was being drafted, reviewed by administration. Change took time in a hospital setting, but it was happening. Then, on a Wednesday night, everything changed. Daniel was at the nurse's station, finishing charting, when he heard rapid footsteps behind him. He turned to see Elaine striding down the hall, her face pale, her usually composed demeanor fractured. Her hair, normally pulled back in a perfect bun, had come slightly loose. Her hand trembled as she gripped her phone. She didn't acknowledge him. She walked straight into the staff lounge and closed the door. Marcus appeared at Daniel's elbow, concern evident. No idea. A moment later, the lounge door opened and Elaine emerged, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was tight, urgent, stripped of its usual authoritative control. "I don't care what you have to do. Just get her to County General. I'm on my way." She ended the call and started toward the elevator, her stride unsteady. "Director Porter?" Daniel called out. Elaine stopped, but didn't turn around. "Is everything okay?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. "It's fine," Elaine said, her voice brittle, on the edge of breaking. "Family emergency." She walked away, disappearing into the elevator. Daniel stood there for a moment, watching the doors close. He exchanged a glance with Marcus, who looked equally concerned. Daniel didn't see Elaine for the rest of the night. But at 2 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Richard Moore. Elaine's mother was in a car accident. Serious, but stable. Elaine's at County General now. Just wanted you to know in case she's out for a few days. Daniel stared at the message, his mind immediately going to that moment in the hallway. Elaine's pale face, her trembling hand, the way her voice had cracked on the phone. Then he made a decision. At 6 a.m., when his shift ended, Daniel didn't go home. Instead, he drove to County General Hospital, a 20-minute trip across the city through early morning traffic. He found the ICU waiting room on the 3rd floor, following the familiar signs of a place he'd been in different circumstances. Elaine sat alone in the corner, her blazer discarded on the chair beside her, her blouse wrinkled from hours of wear. She looked smaller than he'd ever seen, her hunched forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her usual armor of authority completely stripped away. Daniel approached slowly, his steps quiet on the linoleum floor. Director Porter. Elaine looked up, her eyes red-rimmed from crying or exhaustion, or both. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something that might have been defensiveness or shame. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about your mother," Daniel said, his voice gentle. "I wanted to see if there's anything I can do." Elaine's jaw tightened, her hands clenching. "It's not pity," Daniel said quietly. He pulled a chair over and sat a respectful distance away, giving her space but offering presence. "It's just, I've been where you are, and it's terrible, and no one should have to do it alone." Elaine didn't respond. Daniel waited. Finally, Elaine spoke, her voice hollow. She was driving home from the grocery store. Some kid ran a red light, T-boned her on the driver's side. They had to cut her out of the car. "I'm so sorry." Elaine pressed her fingers to her temples. "She's stable now. Broken ribs, fractured pelvis, concussion. But they said she'll recover." "That's good." "Yeah." Elaine's voice cracked. "But I wasn't there. I was at work. And when I got the call, She stopped, shaking her head. "I couldn't think. I couldn't focus. All I could think about was getting to her." Daniel nodded. "That's normal, is it?" Elaine looked at him, her eyes raw. "Because all I could think about yesterday was how I've been telling you that checking your phone is a distraction, that personal matters shouldn't interfere with work. And then the second my mother was hurt, I couldn't have cared less about the hospital. Because she's your mother," Daniel said gently. "And Emma is your daughter," Elaine said, her voice breaking. "God, Carter, I've been such a hypocrite." Daniel didn't argue. He just sat with her. After a long silence, Elaine wiped her eyes. "I didn't know. About your wife. About why you check your phone. I never asked." "I know. I should have." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. Elaine looked at him, something like shame in her expression. I thought I was protecting the hospital, protecting standards, but all I was doing was making people feel like they had to choose between their jobs and their families. You were doing what you thought was right, Daniel said. But sometimes what feels like control is just fear. Elaine let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry. For all of it, Daniel nodded. I appreciate that. They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Daniel stood. Do you need anything? Coffee? Food? No, Elaine said. But, thank you. You're welcome. As Daniel turned to leave, Elaine called out. Carter? He stopped. When you go back to work tonight, Elaine said, check your phone as much as you need to. I mean it. Daniel gave her a small, tired smile. I will. Elaine returned to work 2 weeks later. Her mother was recovering at a rehabilitation facility, and while the prognosis was good, the experience had clearly left its mark. The first thing Elaine did was call a meeting with Richard and Daniel. They gathered in the same conference room where Daniel had refused to sign the corrective action plan. This time, the dynamic was completely different. Elaine began without preamble. I owe you both an apology, especially you, Daniel. Daniel didn't interrupt. I've spent the last 2 weeks thinking about what happened, Elaine continued. About the policies I've enforced, about the way I've treated people. And I realize now that I was wrong, not just about you, about the entire culture I've been creating. I appreciate you saying that, Daniel said. I don't just want to say it, Elaine replied. I want to fix it. Richard leaned forward. What are you proposing? Elaine opened a folder and slid a document across the table. A new policy, one that acknowledges that our staff are human beings with lives, families, and emergencies. One that trusts people to manage their own responsibilities as long as patient care isn't compromised. Daniel picked up the document and read through it. It was thoughtful, specific, and fair. It outlined clear guidelines for personal device use permitted during breaks, permitted in emergencies, permitted as long as it didn't interfere with patient safety. It also included provisions for flexible scheduling, mental health support, and family leave. This is good, Daniel said. It's a start, Elaine corrected. But I want your input, both of you. I want to make sure this policy actually serves the people it's meant to protect. Over the next hour, the three of them worked through the document, refining language, adding clauses, ensuring that the policy reflected the reality of working in healthcare. By the end, they had something that felt human. There's one more thing, Elaine said. She looked at Daniel. I want to formally rescind the warning I issued you. It'll be removed from your file, and I want to write a letter of commendation recognizing your dedication to both your patients and your family. Daniel blinked, surprised. You don't have to. I do, Elaine interrupted, because what you did standing up for yourself, for what was right that took courage, and I want to make sure the record reflects that. Daniel felt something shift inside him, not forgiveness, exactly, but something close to it. Thank you. Elaine nodded. No, thank you. 3 months later, the new policy was implemented at Riverside Children's Hospital. Staff meetings explained the changes. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Daniel continued working nights, continued being there for Emma every morning, continued keeping his promise to Sarah. But now he didn't have to hide. One evening, during his break, Daniel sat in the staff lounge and called Emma. She was at Mrs. Patterson's working on a school project. Hi, Dad. Emma's voice was bright. Hey, kiddo, how's the project going? Good. I'm making Saturn out of papier-mâché. Want to see? I'd love to, but I'm at work. Can you show me when I get home? Okay. Love you, Dad. Love you too. Daniel hung up, smiling. Marcus walked in, grabbing a soda. Emma, doing okay? Yeah. She's making planets. Marcus grinned. Nice. He popped open the soda. That whole thing with Elaine had changed things around here. Good, Daniel said. Yeah, you started something, man. Daniel shrugged. I just didn't want to break a promise. That's exactly why it mattered, Marcus said. On a quiet Sunday morning, Daniel and Emma made pancakes together. Emma stood on a step stool, carefully pouring batter while Daniel supervised. Perfect circle, Daniel said. Emma beamed. Thanks. Can we put chocolate chips in the next one? Absolutely. They ate breakfast at the small kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window. Emma told him about her upcoming field trip. Daniel told her about a patient he'd helped a boy who'd been scared of needles until Daniel showed him a magic trick. You're good at your job, Dad, Emma said through a mouthful of pancake. Thanks, sweetheart. Mom would be proud of you. Daniel's throat tightened. You think so? I know so, Emma said. She told me once that you always do the right thing, even when it's hard. Daniel reached across the table and took Emma's hand. She was right about a lot of things. Emma squeezed his hand. She was right about you. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat on the couch with tea. He thought about the last few months, about the confrontation with Elaine, about the impossible choice he'd refused to make, about the policy that had changed because he'd refused to stay silent. He thought about Sarah, and the promise, and the life they'd built before cancer stole her away. And he thought about Emma, strong, perceptive, brave, growing up in a world where she'd always know her father chose her. Daniel didn't win because he was loud. He didn't win because he fought. He won because he refused to compromise on the things that mattered most. And in the end, that was the only victory that counted.